Einen wunderschönen guten Morgen. Ich begrüße Sie
I
ganz
would like to wish
herzlich
everybody a very
heute
good morning.
auf der HELLER
I'd like to welcome you
Schön, dass Sie dabei
today
sind.
to
Ich hoffe, Sie
HELLER
konnten sich problemlos
It's
einloggen
great that
und
you're
können uns
here.
jetzt auch
I
gut
hope
hören.
you had no
Mein Name ist
problems
Holger Röhr,
dialing in
Chefredakteur
and can
der
hear us well.
Fachzeitschrift
My name is
MAV
Holger Röhr.
aus dem Konradin
I'm
Verlag.
the
Ja, das
editor-in-chief
Thema
of the
dieser
MAV
Talkrunde
magazine
ist
from the
Flexibilität
Conradin
in der
Publishing
Fertigung,
House. We're talking
Herausforderungen
about
und Grenzen der
flexibility in
Automatisierung. Ja, ich
manufacturing,
freue mich auf
challenges
meine
and
kompetenten
limitations of
Gesprächspartner in dieser
automation.
Runde direkt neben mir.
And I
Dieter
have Dieter Drexler
Managing
here on
Director
the panel,
Project
Managing
and
Director
Applications.
Project and
In der Mitte Jochen
Applications.
Kern,
And there's
Senior
Jochen Kern,
Manager
Senior Manager
Application
Application Industrial.
und außen
And
Robert
we
Eber,
have Robert
Manager
Eber,
FMS
Manager
Systems.
FMS Systems.
Bevor wir jetzt richtig loslegen,
Now,
möchte ich Ihnen
before
noch
we
ein paar
begin,
kurze Hinweise geben.
I
Sie
would
als
just like
Teilnehmer und
to make a
Zuhörer
few
sind
housekeeping
stumm geschaltet.
remarks.
Selbstverständlich
As
können Sie
viewers
trotzdem Fragen
and
stellen. Sie haben die
participants, you
Möglichkeit,
are
mit uns zu
muted,
chatten.
but of
Sie
course you
können
can
uns
ask us
Nachrichten schicken,
questions.
Ihre
You
Fragen
can post
stellen. Ich werde
questions
sie
in
am
the
Ende des
chat, and I will
Gespräches
come
dann
back to these
aufgreifen und
questions
in die
at
Diskussion
the end
einbringen.
of our talk
Wenn
here.
Fragen aus zeitlichen
And I
Gründen
will
nicht mehr
introduce
beantwortet werden
them
können,
to
können
the
Sie sich gerne mit
discussion.
den Experten auch im
If
Nachgang
questions cannot be
noch
answered
auf den
here
Weg
for
von
time reasons, you can always contact our experts
Ja,
via the chat.
Flexibilität in der
Well,
Fertigung.
flexibility in
Wer
manufacturing.
heute Bauteile in der sparenden Fertigung
If
produziert,
you
stellt sich nicht die Frage,
produce
ob er eine
parts by
Automatisierung
means
braucht.
of metal
In aller
cutting,
Regel
you won't
ist
ask
die
the question
Herausforderung
whether you
die
need
richtige Lösung,
automation.
die
The
für das
challenge is to
jeweilige
find the
Spektrum
right
am
solutions
besten passende
which
Automation zu
fits
wählen. Und
the
über die Herausforderung
application
wollen wir jetzt
best.
sprechen.
And this
Herr
is the
Kern,
challenge that we would
von
like to
welchen
talk about
Faktoren
here
hängt es
today.
denn ab,
Now, Mr.
welche
Kern,
Automationslösung für den
what
Anwender
are
die
the
richtige ist?
factors on which the right automation solution depends? Now, that's a very important question regarding automation. As a starting point, we have prepared a few slides just to show you how we cluster different automation solutions. Now, we can divide all this up into gantry automation, robot automation, and so-called pallet automation. And as you can see here on this chart, as a rough picture, you can say that production volume decreases from left to right, but at the same time, flexibility increases. And this is just a rough picture, you know. All these automation types can be combined, and thus you can accomplish different goals. What is characteristic of these three variants? You know, just to give you a few catwords. Now, gantry automation. Now, here we're talking about high production volumes, large quantities. The gantry comes from the top. Sometimes it is floor-based, and it can be a hanging robot or a gantry. So both is possible. When we talk about robot automation, it's small batch sizes or medium batch sizes, unless it is a dedicated volume series cell. But the difference to gantry automation is that not always, you know, in robot automation, it is the workpiece that is handled individually, but you can also work with a workpiece carrier. And this then brings us on to the third kind, the third automation type, and that is pallet automation. So you handle pallets. It could be the machine pallet, but it could also be a zero-point clamping pallet or something like a Euro pallet that can be integrated with the parts. Now, these different versions bring us on to your question. What are the influencing factors? Now, I talked about production volumes and flexibility, but there's more. Now, when we talk to customers, we find workpieces of different sizes, of different weights. Now, that's an influencing factor. Or what about space conditions on the shop floor? Do they have space? Both, you know, whether the factory floor is high enough or broad enough or wide enough. And we have the influencing factor of cycle time. So how long does the workpiece remain in the machine? And then the part variety, also the investment volume, then also shift models according to which the customer works, then also skill of workers and also capacity of human resources, and then also work-piece automation and also tool automation. And then also third-party machines. Do we have to measure, debur, clean, mark all these other operations that may take place around the machine? All this could be requirements. And then also control engineering. The control systems and systems that are used for data exchange with, for example, an ERP system, and which kind of map the production philosophy. Now, that's the last major influencing factor which plays a role and which may also influence the taste of the customer. Now, how do you make sure that all these different criteria are then actually also met? Well, again, excellent question. And it is always so important to talk to customers. I mean, our salespeople and also all the technical people, the engineers, we need to talk to customers. So very close communication, a very close exchange with the customer is important. Now, how does this happen? What is the contribution made by the customer? What is your contribution? Well, let me put it that way. I think there are three areas that we can address. The one is the machine. Then we have the automation, and we have an overall project. Now, when it comes to the machine, the task is to look at the workpieces. The workpiece, the way the workpieces are clamped, all this influences the fixture. We are talking about the size and the weight, and all these factors influence the automation solution. And the workpiece actually shapes the automation that makes sense. Well, the complete competence for designing automation is present at HELLER. We have all this in-house. Now, it begins with the design phase, then the quotation and the proposal and the implementation of the actual project. All this is covered by us at HELLER. So we master all the disciplines: mechanical design, electrical design, software design, commissioning, and service. All these are things that we cover at HELLER. And it, doesn't depend on the kind of automation: gantry, pallet automation, robot automation. And for these purposes, we have partners in cooperation with whom we can offer the right solution. Now, when it comes to the overall project, the complete project, we can take up any role that is necessary. We can just deliver the machine, but we can also be the general contractor with the entire responsibility for the solution. Who are the partners that HELLER takes on board in order to implement such a major project? Well, as HELLER, we have a large network of different partners depending on the requirement, depending on the customer's requirement regarding the automation. So there are several partners from which we can choose. I would like to mention partners that we have worked with for many, many years. For example, Fastums, Liebherr, and Aroa. These three partners are also present here at Vicon. They have their own virtual booth, if you like. So this is a long-standing partnership, so these are the partners that we would prefer. Now, I would be interested to understand the trends that are brought to you from the market regarding automation. No, for quite a while, we've actually felt the trend of decreasing batch sizes. So batch sizes are becoming smaller and smaller. But all this goes hand in hand with the requirement for larger flexibility. And the approaches that we pursue in order to offer that kind of flexibility are not always new. We're trying to resort to tried and tested systems and methods, but of course we would also like to consider new technologies, innovations. And we might also use tried and tested technologies and combine them in a new, innovative way. One example that I'd like to quote are AGVs, automatic guided vehicles. These are systems that we know from the past. They've always been present on the shop floor. They come and they disappear again, but we know them from intralogistics. So material transport on the shop floor. So this could be the raw part or the finished part, but it could also be a machine pallet with fixtures, could be transported as well by AGVs. So these basic systems allow us to, to modify them and use them for different purposes. It is, for example, possible to load machines by means of AGVs as a replacement for pallet automation. An AGV can approach the machine. It can load the workpieces or the pallets onto the machine or also unload. And it is not only possible to do this with workpieces, but also with tools. So this is a new way of using AGVs, innovative, and of course this is something that we like to do. But it's also important to consider and account for customer needs. It's not something, it's not a panacea. It is something, you get together with your customers, you tell them what's possible, you've got to talk about it and see whether this fits the requirements. And then together you can develop the right automation solution. You said the right automation solution. Can you dwell on that? Give us more details. What do you mean? When is an automation solution right? Well, the machine tool has a spindle, and the spindle has got to turn, of course, when you want to machine a workpiece. And at the end of the day, the quality and the time, the cycle time must be right. But that's the main effect. Automation, we're talking about unmanned manufacturing or strongly reduced manning. So the benefit must be there. And automation must not disturb production. That's very important. Oh, yes, you're right, absolutely. What are the areas that can be covered by means of automation? You already talked about measuring or buffer. What are some of the elements that can be covered by automation? Now, from the point of view of automation, everything is possible. There's no technical limitations. There are benefits for customers such as unmanned shifts or strong reduction of manning, light-out production, production over the weekend with low staff levels. So, machines become more or less autonomous. Or also when it comes to the handling of the workpiece. So the workpiece, or the automation has to be right for the workpiece. How do we need to handle the workpiece? I mean, the basic task is load the machine. But of course, this is not all. We can do much more with automation. The details of handling the workpiece, measuring, marking, cleaning. So these are processes which are immediately related to the workpiece, and all these processes can be automated. So automation is not only on the machine itself, but also around the machine. And then you can say, okay, the raw part goes in and the finished part comes out of the system. And that's what we said earlier on. We don't want to feel it. It mustn't disturb production. We don't want any downtimes or interruptions. Automation has got to work and has got to take over as many tasks as possible. Yeah, we're talking about, not disturbing. We're talking about a number of influencing factors, and it becomes rather clear that we're talking about a high level of complexity here. Now, if a customer has complex cells, like with 2 or 3 machines, maybe you can use one robot system to feed all 3 machines, but then you've got other factors that come in. For example, does the customer want to operate all 3 machines, or do they want to scale up or down? What about redundancy? Maybe you want to use 2 cells instead of 1, and maybe you will have 2 robots. What about peripheral machines? Are these then shared between the 2, or does every cell get its own periphery? So it is a dialogue. You've got to share all this with the customer, and then you will find a joint solution. Well, you said unmanned shift, or, what does this mean? No staff at all? And what is the difference between unmanned or strongly reduced manning? Well, I would have said, light out production, unmanned shifts, is a clear difference to strongly reduced manning, because then it's not only about automation. And Robert, you said there's no limits to automation, but it also depends on the process in the machine. Of course, in the machine, there are options to have this machine run under light-out conditions. But of course, there may be parts or workpieces where the customer says, no, this finish operation or this operation can only be done when I have my best people on site. But then it's not the automation that is the limiting factor, but it's a philosophy or a wish of the customer to have his staff, to have the operators there while this operation is running. And I said this, automation doesn't only affect the machine itself, but there are peripheral processes that can be integrated. And the more I can integrate these peripheral processes, the better my possibilities to intervene, a person transporting parts from A to B for cleaning, for measuring. If I manage to include all this in a system which is fully automated, all these tasks can be taken over by the system, and workers are no longer necessary, or operators. So the more I extend or expand this, the more or less I need the worker, and all the transport and interlogistics may take place in an unmanned way by means of automation. Well, you introduced us to all the different possibilities: gantry automation, robot automation, pallet automation. What if I want to automate a system, more or less automated, or include more or less steps? Can we say that this depends on the desired output, or productivity. So my question actually is, if you have a smaller system, a smaller machine which doesn't produce so many parts, is it still worthwhile to have automation even with smaller machines? Well, production output or production volume. What I meant by this when I said this at the beginning was that, of course, you have large series or you have small batches or even just the production of one individual part. So definition is necessary here. Automation versions can cover the whole range. So it will always be beneficial, even if you only have small batches, to have automation, because all the other possibilities and other advantages, such as unmanned, light-out production, or, for example, to be able, to play around with de-skilling, so you do not need the most skilled workers to operate the machine. Now, these are things that are independent of the production volume or the production output of the machine. Well, thanks very much. We've covered a number of things here, a number of topics. But my question would be, are there any questions from the chat? Yes, we have a question here. How long do projects need from concept to installation? I would like to repeat the question. So how long does it take for a project from the concept to the final implementation with the customer? Well, this depends on different parameters, and we covered most of these during this talk here. Now, complexity, I think, is the most important criterion. I mean, a more simple automation, no matter how exactly, will need a lead time of 6 months, 7 months. Or if it is more complex, or when host computing plays a role, then we're talking about 12 months as a realistic time frame. Are there any questions, any more questions from the chat? No, there aren't. So let me ask one final question, which is more or less also a summary of what we've heard during this panel. Well, how can HELLER make sure that customers always get the best solution for their purposes? Well, it is part and parcel of our philosophy to engage in communication with our customers. It is one of our objectives to contact customers and to talk to them about their issues, about their tasks. So the production task is the central issue. We've got our specialists, of course, they focus on metal cutting, but we also share our knowledge when it comes to clamping, to fixtures, material handling, workpiece handling, in order to provide to the customer a whole package. Well, thanks very much. I think it was great to hear about automation, what the benefits of automation are, what the opportunities of automation are, and that it is really beneficial to enter into a dialogue with you and to find out more. Thank you. Well, we're going to continue at 10 o'clock. At 10 o'clock, we're going to present the new generation of the 5-axis machining center HF to you. So you can stay tuned or log in again later at 10 o'clock. And I hope you get some more interesting insights here at VCon.